Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Gopijana Vallabha Jaya Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Jaya Prabhu Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Hare Krishna, everyone. So we are reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 26, Verse 9. Devahuti Ruvacha Prakriteh Purashashyapi Lakshanam Purushottamam Bruhi Karanayorasyam Sadasa Chadyad Atmakam Devahutiruvacha Prakriteh Purushashyapi Lakshanam Purushottamam Bruhi Karanayorasya Sadasa Chadat Atmakam. Prakrite Purushashyapi Lakshanam Purushottamam Bruhi Karanayorasya Sadasachadatmakam Devahuti Vacha Prakrite Purushashyapi Lakshanam Purushottamam Bruhi Karanayorasya Sadasachatmakam Devahuti Vacha Prakrite Purushashyapi Lakshmanam Purushottamam Bruhi Karanayorasya Sadasachayadatmakam Devahuti Vacha. Devahuti said, Prakrite of his energies, Purushasya of the Supreme Person, Api also, Lakshanam characteristics, Purusha Uttamam or Supreme Personality of Godhead. Bruhi, kindly explain. Karanayo, causes. Ashya, of this creation. Sadasat, manifest and unmanifest. Cha, and. Yatatmakam, consisting of which. Translation. Devahuti said, O Supreme Personality of Godhead, kindly explain the characteristics of the Supreme Person and his energies, for both of these are the causes of this manifest and unmanifest creation. Purport. Prakriti, or material nature, is connected with both the Supreme Lord and the living entities, just as a woman is connected with her husband as a wife, and with her children as a mother. In Bhagavad Gita, the Lord says that he impregnates Mother Nature with children, living entities, and thereafter all species of living entities become manifest. The relationship of all living entities with the material nature has been explained. Now, an understanding of the relationship between material nature and the Supreme Lord is sought by Devahuti. The product of that relationship is stated to be the manifest and unmanifest material world. The unmanifest material world is the subtle Mahatattva, and from that Mahatattva, the material manifestation has emerged. In the Vedic literature, in the Vedic literatures, it is said that by glance of the Supreme Lord, the total material energy is impregnated, and then everything is born of material nature. It is also confirmed in the 9th chapter of Bhagavad Gita that under his glance, Adyakshana, under his direction and by his will, nature is working. It is not that nature works blindly. After understanding the position of the conditioned soul in relation to material nature, Devahuti wanted to know how nature works under the direction of the Lord, and what the relationship is between the material nature and the Lord. In other words, she wanted to learn the characteristics of the Supreme Lord in relation to the material nature. The relationship of the living entities with matter and that of the Supreme Lord with matter are certainly not on the same level, although the Mayavadis might interpret it in that way. When it is said that the living entities are bewildered, the Mayavadi philosophers ascribe this bewilderment to the Supreme Lord, but that is not applicable. The Lord is never bewildered. That is the difference between personalists and impersonalists. Devahuti is not unintelligent. She has enough intelligence to understand that the living entities are not on the same level of the Supreme Lord. Because the living entities are infinitesimal, they become bewildered or conditioned by material nature. But this does not mean that the Supreme Lord is also conditioned or bewildered. The difference between the conditioned soul and the Lord is that the Lord is the Lord, the master of material nature, and he is therefore not subject to its control. He is controlled neither by spiritual nature nor by material nature. He is the supreme controller himself, and he cannot be compared to ordinary living entities who are controlled by the laws of material nature. Two words used in this verse are Sat and Asat. The cosmic manifestation is Asat. It does not exist, but the material nature of the Supreme Lord is Sat, or ever existing. Material nature is ever existing in its subtle form as the energy of the Lord, but it sometimes manifests this non-existent or temporarily existent nature, the cosmos. An analogy may be made with the father and mother. The mother and the father exist, but sometimes the mother begets children. Similarly, this cosmic manifestation, which comes from the unmanifest material nature of the Supreme Lord, sometimes appears and again disappears. But the material nature is ever existing, and the Lord is the supreme cause for both the subtle and gross manifestations of that material world, of this material world. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishna Bhatali Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Namine. Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pashtitya Dashatarine. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasati Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyevacha Patitanam Pavanabhyo Vaishnavabhyo Namo Namaha. So in this chapter, Devahuti, she wants to understand the relationship between material nature and living entities, and also material nature and Supreme Personality of Godhead. And these are very important topics for discussion. So these topics basically include Krishna's energy, creation, cause and effect, our free will, laws of karma. And these topics are quite complex to understand, especially when we talk about free will, when we talk about laws of karma. all these topics are not so easy to understand, and they may feel dry and technical and repetitive. We hear about them over and over again. We hear all the time that we are not this body, that we're not the doer, that there is 3 modes of material nature. We hear it all the time. Yes, but there is just little encouragement here. There is a verse in Srimad Bhagavatam, 2nd Canto, chapter 7, verse 53, which states, "The Lord activities in association with his different energies should be discussed, appreciated, and heard in accordance with the teachings of the Supreme Lord. This is done regularly with devotion and respect. If this is done regularly with devotion and respect, one is sure to get out of the illusionary energy of the Lord." And in a purport there, Srila Prabhupada writes this passage. "Some of them think that to hear about the pastimes of the Lord means to hear about his activities with the gopis, or about his pastimes like lifting the Govardhana hill, and they have nothing to do with the Lord's plenary expansions as Purushavatars and their pastimes of the creation, maintenance, or annihilation of the material worlds. But a pure devotee knows that there is no difference between the pastimes of the Lord, either in Rasa Lila or in creation, maintenance, or destructions of the material world. Rather, the descriptions of such activities of the Lord as the Purushavataras are specifically meant for persons who are in the clutches of the external energy. Topics like Rasa Lila are meant for the liberated souls and not for the conditioned souls. The conditioned souls, therefore, must hear with appreciation and devotion the Lord's pastimes in relationship with external energy, and such acts are as good as the hearing of Rasa Lila in the liberated stage. A conditioned soul should not imitate the activities of liberated souls. Lord Sri Chaitanya never indulged in hearing the Rasa Lila with ordinary men." So in this passage, we can hear the blessing that is promised by Srimad Bhagavatam. It says that if this discussion is done regularly with devotion and respect, one is sure to get out of the illusionary energy of the Lord. And this is what we're aspiring. We're trying to be free from material energy, from the influence of material energy, which is very difficult to overcome, as we know. But it is interesting point here. Why does it say that it is especially meant for the persons who are in the clutches of Maya? And this knowledge about Krishna's creations, about his energies, about the ways and why this world been created, it is actually constitutes Sambandha Gyan. So Sambandha Gyan is understanding of relationship with Krishna, understanding of our position. And unless we have that understanding, it is very difficult for us to practice spiritual life. This is a very first step that we have to gain that understanding. We have to understand what is material energy, why material world been created, what is my place in it. Because unless we understand the material energy, we can't understand spiritual energy, which is both. It is said in Srimad Bhagavatam that to understand Krishna, we have to understand his spiritual and material energy, him as a person also. All these things constitute the understanding of Krishna. We have to know all these aspects. So we have to understand why this material world been created, how we became conditioned. We have to understand the place of Krishna in this, because people often say, if there is God, why I'm suffering? This is a classical question that people often ask, and it's confronting question in a way, but it clearly shows that this is the lack of that Sambandha Gyan, when we don't understand why it is happening to us. And I remember my son asking me this. He was very small, only 5 years old, and you're trying to introduce them to Krishna consciousness and, just give them little bits of philosophy here and there, and then he goes, well, Krishna is me and putting me here. Yeah, so, and that's why we're saying that we have to discuss it. over and over again, because we do hear about it, but nevertheless, during our life, as a devotees, and we can be devotees for many years, but occasionally something happened to us, and we go, why? Why am I suffering? Why Krishna knows? Why is he doing this to me? And we do know that Krishna is in control and that he's our best friend, but yes, nevertheless, we get in those situations in our life, and they're hard, they're painful. So that's why we do have to, discuss it. We do have to come back to it. We do have to remind ourselves. We can't just hear it once. And the main problem is that we think that this material world is created for our enjoyment. That desire of enjoyment and controlling and dominating, that is the root cause of everything. Yes, and people think that God is meant to make them happy. We know that from first chapter of Bhagavad Gita, where Arjuna gets into this difficult situation, and he calls Krishna. I'm actually starting to forget now which exact name was it, Govinda, and he's telling him that or one of those names, when he's asking him, you're supposed to make me happy. My feelings meant to be happy. So yes, this is a classic bewilderment. We think that this world is for our enjoyments. So unless we understand that this world is not meant for our enjoyment, we can't really go any further. Because this world has actually been created for us to understand that we cannot enjoy without Krishna. So unless we understand that Sambandha Gyan, then a lot of time gets wasted. Because we do not understand our purpose in this life. We do not understand what it means that every single one of us have our quota. There is a verse in Shisha Upanishad, which basically stating that everything animate or inanimate that is within the universe is controlled and owned by the Lord. One should therefore accept only these things necessary for himself, which are set aside as his quota, and one should not accept other things, knowing well to whom they belong. So this is actually another very important concept. So when we understand that we can only get that much happiness that karma would allow us, and that much suffering that we allow to have, we stop putting that much effort and fight for it. Because the world we live in, we're constantly getting exposed to this. We say we should avoid jana sangha, we should avoid association with materialistic people. But the reality is that the Maya is really strong, and she's very enthusiastic in her service to Krishna. So we don't need to go far. We live in a little town, Murvilumba, it's like not Sydney, not Melbourne. We have this beautiful community. It's really 15 minutes away, devotees, wherever you go to calls. But we get exposed to this materialistic association every time we log onto Facebook or Instagram, and we just get bombarded by, all these things. You want to be pretty, you want to be successful, you want to be this and that, you want to have these things, you want to go traveling. So we're constantly getting that materialistic association. So it is very difficult to remember these things. So unless we understand our position in our world, unless we understand how we become conditioned and why this world been created, we would spend lots of time trying to solve things that we cannot solve. It's like we hear people talking about trying to make your life long, and inventing all this medicine, and how do we extend the life of one person so it goes beyond 100 years or something. But the reality of it that it's not up to us. Like, we can create this medicine, but if you're supposed to live only 20 years, then you only live 20 years, doesn't matter what you do. So these concepts are very important. There's a good example my Guru Maharaj often cites. He's talking about lecture that Srila Prabhupada was giving on the first canto of Srimad Bhagavad Gita, where Duryodhana describes, he talks to, what is the name of his, Dronacharya. Sorry, my brain is a bit slow today. He's talking to Dronacharya and he's telling him about Pandava's formations. And he describes them really well. You know, he tells them all the strength, all the weaknesses. And Srila Prabhupada is saying this is very intelligent. We should know our enemy really well. If we want to be successful, we need to know their strategies, and that's what people in business do. They know really well what is my opponent good at. You know, so just like we were mentioning, we're constantly associating with material energy. So to be able to give ourselves a chance to fight, we need to understand how it works. How does it bind us? How it tricks us? How the samsara circle happening over and over again. So this is the Sambandha Gyan. And another important point here is that when we discuss these topics, we start to understand that God is great. We start to understand the power of his energies, which is also a first step of understanding. We have to try to understand how Krishna is so great, you know, and that's why we have, for example, deity worship. We have so many rules and regulations. Everything has to be done precisely on time. And I remember thinking about it. Why is it so important? I know that there was a pujari in Krishna Balaram temple in Vrindavan who was once late for the puja for a few minutes, and he was never allowed to serve deities anymore. And it felt really harsh, you know, like, why is it has to be so, you know, official, so, like, regulated? But it makes sense if you think about it, because I remember when there was a royal wedding happening, and it was broadcasted everywhere, so even if you try, it's really hard not to notice that it's happening. And I remember just noticing they had this interesting thing when guests were arrived. It wasn't like everyone arrived at 4:30 and the wedding starts. No, they had a specific time when George Clooney arrives. You know, his car comes at 4:31, and then the next one comes at 4:33. And that was the first time I've realized, ooh, it kind of makes you feel, okay, this is a big deal here. You know, this is serious people getting married, and everything has just been orchestrated. So, unfortunately, now in our position, we do have to first understand that God is great. Just like it says in here, that before we can understand spiritual energy, we have to understand the material energy. Because if we don't understand that Krishna is great and how great he is, then when we look at his rasa leelas, then we would just think that, well, it is just the same what I do. It's just same mundane relationship. And that's what it makes it so difficult, because it is really hard to grasp Krishna's energies, because we're trying to understand everything through our perception, through the limits of our brain, you know, our experiences. And it's hard for us to understand what is it like not to have time. There is no time in spiritual world. How do you understand that? That is so weird. You know, how you try to understand how things work, you know, and trying to imagine that Krishna doesn't have, he doesn't have beginning. How is that, you know? Because everything we know in material world has beginning and an end. And all of a sudden we have to grasp the concept that Krishna always been, and we always been. There was no time when he didn't exist. You know, so it is very difficult, it is very technical and dry sometimes. But the whole point here is that, you know, we have to make endeavor. And I sometimes think, you know, sitting here and trying to talk something in the Bhagavatam class, and I look at deities and there's Prabhupada, and I'm thinking, oh my God, Krishna is probably watching me from altar thinking, oh my God, listen to what she's like trying to say here, looking cute, trying to talk about my energies, you know. But that's the whole point, you know, we have to put an effort. It's like Mother Yashoda, she was trying to bind Krishna with a rope. And how can you possibly bind the Supreme Personality of Godhead? You know, it's impossible. Like, how can you bind someone like that? But she was doing it, and not just trying to do it out of her ambition or whatever. She was doing it because she was worried about him. She wanted him to grow not spoiled. She wanted him to be a good person when he grows up. So that was her offering of love. She was like, I'm going to try to bind him. And she was trying and trying. She got all sweaty, and her hair started falling apart. And when Krishna sees that offering of endeavor, that's when he, you know, he become bind. So he let her to bind him. And we can relate to that. Anyone who have children know that, children draw pictures and they come and give them to you. And it's, you look really funny there. It's like a round, egg-shaped head, and there is just sticks, and like you don't have a neck usually. It's just like round body straight away, and then there is like legs, and that is so sweet. Like I still keep those because they put that effort and draw something ridiculous and they give it to you. And we hold on to these pictures for years. Like I have my drawer full of them, because that's their expression of love. So when we try to understand Krishna's energies, that is our expression of love. We show that, okay, I'm putting a bit of effort, I'm trying to understand, I'm trying, because Krishna likes when we talk about him. And that's what he accepts. So eventually when we try again and again, we talk about it, we discuss it. There is a difference between just a lecture or a discussion. We come back to that a bit later, I guess. So that's when we get his mercy. And only by Krishna's mercy we can understand. He gives us enough so we can come to him. He gives us enough understanding. Because when you read in Bhagavatam that to understand Krishna, you have to know his external energy and internal energy, and him as a person and his relationship, and you're just like, wow, this is a lot to figure out. And most of the time when we read, we fall asleep. I mean, speaking for myself, really. It's like, I remember when I was younger, there was a joke. If you can't fall asleep at night, just start reading Bhagavatam, a few minutes in and you'll be out. And if you think about it, imagining your friend or someone you love and they read about you, or they read your letter and just falling asleep, You try to talk to your partner and you tell them everything about you and they're just falling asleep. But that's heartbreaking. This goes to like counseling and after that. But that's the way we are. Like we read about Krishna and we literally like so bored sometimes. But we put that effort. We're just trying to do our best. And another benefit of doing it is that it is explained that the more we learn about Krishna's energies, we start to see him everywhere. When we wake up in the morning and we see sun, and we know we didn't do any effort. Krishna just provided that sun for us. He provided us water. The beautiful birds are flying around. He gives us life energy to digest our food or to go somewhere. And we start to notice that actually everything that's happening around us is connected to Krishna. Krishna is controlling everything. Krishna is our best friend. So the more we meditate on this, we start seeing Krishna everywhere. And then the following verses in this chapter, and then there is a verse where Krishna is saying that he comes as time, which I found really interesting and encouraging, because as we're getting older, for me personally, I'm really scared of getting old, because this is the time when you have to get detached from things you have. You start noticing that you become irrelevant to lots of people. They don't really notice you anymore because you're older. I think death is not even that scary as that part of time, you're getting older. But actually, Krishna says that this is me. I'm coming to remind you. Here I am. This is time. You gotta focus on your spiritual life more. And that's what Prabhupada said. And I guess another point, also important point here, is that even if we don't understand, even if it's so hard and difficult, like you can read the 5th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam and there is description of how Krishna created universe and the layers of the universe and where the sun is and where the moon is. It's like completely off charts. Like it is so hard to understand. But the beauty of the whole process is that just like it says here, it is not different from Krishna Leelas. So the more you read about it, you get in touch with Krishna when we read and talk about it. Even if we don't understand, even if we just read Bhagavatam and we don't understand the word of it, the process still works. We still get in touch with Krishna, we're still purifying. So you can't really, there is no loss. So as we're coming closer to the topic of the actual verse, did anyone happen to still remember what Srila Prabhupada was writing in his purport? What is the main difference between living entities and Supreme Lord in relation to material nature? Did anyone still remember from purport? Okay, well, the main difference was that the living entity is controlled by material nature, whether the Lord is the one who is mastering over it. So that is very important point, because Srila Prabhupada in his lecture on that verse, he was saying that oftentimes we hear there is two Purushas, and there is actual Purusha, who is Bhagavan, and then there is living entity that sometimes is also called Purusha, because living entity wants to enjoy and dominate. And when living entity has a free will, which makes so much sense that we have free will, because Krishna has to give us free will, otherwise our loving relationship with him is not really meaningful if there is no free will, isn't it? No one wants, our partner be with us because they don't have choice. No one wants to have friendship because the other person doesn't have choice. We need to feel that volunteer thing there, reciprocation. We do this with our friends. One day I call you and ask you to go for a walk, then I want you to call me and ask me to go for a walk. Otherwise I feel like I'm always asking you and I'm the one who's needy here. So you need to have this. So that's why we have this free will, because that makes the love real. It gives this rasa in there. But then at some point the living entity wants to enjoy and it wants to dominate. And Krishna, being so kind and respecting the free will and knowing that he is the one who is looking after everyone, so he goes out of his way and he creates this phantasmagoria of material world, because the living entity needs, dominate. And it is a very unusual situation for living entity. So that's why Srila Prabhupada says that sometimes the living entity is called Purusha because he is this illusory enjoyer, so-called illusory enjoyer. And it is very unnatural situation. And the example that comes to my mind is that, when we're looking for purpose, for a certain career or something we can be passionate about in our life, something we want to be dedicated to, sometimes it takes time to find that one thing. And we could be good at lots of things. We can try doing this and that, and we could be really good at it, but if it's not something that is our purpose, then we don't feel so satisfied. We try, okay, I can be a good cook, I can be, I don't know, a good driver, or I don't know, I can be a good salesman, but that's not really what I want to do. So you can be doing that, you could be making money, but you're not going to be feeling satisfied. So it's a little bit like that. Or another example that is given even more, that it's like fish that is got out of the water. This is us, separated from Krishna. Very unnatural situation. But this is our desire, this is what we wanted. So Krishna created this phantasmagoria of material world. He creates 24 material elements because he needs to create that field of activity for us. We have to dominate something. So he creates this inferior material nature that living entity can dominate. Just trying to keep up with my thoughts here. Already went through that. Yes, so then there is a catch, obviously. So he creates this material world for us to dominate, but as soon as we come in contact with this is how we became conditioned, because the material nature consists of three modes, guna, sattva, and tamas. And so every time we get in contact and trying to dominate it, this is when we get into contact with it. And this is how conditioning happening. Because if we think about it, the spirit soul is Satchitananda, full of bliss, eternity and knowledge. How can it possibly be contaminated? And this is the process how it works. For us to do this, we have to have this subtle body. And that's when we will learn about this Chaturvyuha. You know how we were reading, that it is important to understand the activities of Purusha avatars and different expansions of Krishna. So we know the first expansion is Lord Balaram, and then from Lord Balaram there is 4 expansions that are coming out, and they are doing all the creation. They maintain the material world. So there is Aniruddha, Sankarshan, Vasudev, and Pradyumna. There's 4 manifestations. In each one of them create part of our subtle body. So Aniruddha is responsible for the mind. Then you have Sankarshan that is responsible for false ego. Then you have Pradyumna that's responsible for intelligence. And then you have Vasudev, which is for consciousness. So they, the deities that maintain our subtle body. And so through that subtle body, we get into contact with material nature to dominate. We put these shoes on and we're trying to walk around and dominate it. And as soon as we do that, we're trying to think that I am this subtle body. I have this character, this certain nature, and I'm trying to dominate. So we're trying so hard to identify with it. So in a sense, we become this body. The good example could be given when we watch movies. There is a 2-hour movie, and if it's good actors in there, then our consciousness get transformed in there. And for 2 hours, we don't notice anything. We're there. And we would cry, and we would laugh, and we would feel all the feelings that the actor's feeling. And it is actually sometimes even recommended to just, if you liking certain hormones, you can watch a romantic movie, and you didn't fall in love, you've been married for 20 years. But then you watch this romantic movie and you kind of reliving these feelings with the actors all over again. And you're feeling butterflies and you're feeling all all these things. So the feelings that you feel are real. It's a real happiness or distress, or you feel something is unfair. The movie is not real, or they say sometimes it's based on true events. But you know what I mean. The movie is not real. We're watching it, but we experience those feelings. So it's the same thing in material world. We come into contact, we're experiencing the things, but our situation here is temporary. It's not real. We don't remember what was there with us in a past life, who was our husband or wife or what we were doing. And this is the reason why we don't remember, because if we did, it would be very difficult to enjoy if you remember what you did your past life and how much you suffered and who was there with you. So yes, so in this way, the living entity owes its happiness and distress, even though it's not technically real. But we feel that it's real because we believe that I'm this body, I'm this subtle body. And it all comes down to this desire of being independent from Krishna. So our free will is just this ability to say, I don't want to be with God. I want to be independent. And from that, everything else escalates pretty quick too. So, yes, so in this way, the living entity is the cause of its own suffering and enjoyment. And it is interesting that it's all coming from desire. We're constantly coming back to this word. It is desire. Because at the end of the day, that's all we can do. We can only desire. If I ask you to raise your arm, just like that, can anyone explain to me how you just did that? I mean, we know there is a science behind it, that there is a brain center impulse, nerve system, muscles, all this. Yes, technically we know. But do you know when did you engage yourself in that mechanical process? We don't think like that. We just want to do something. And there were actually lots of studies done trying to declare that there is no free will. And they found that a lot of our actions done before we actually decide to do them, that the body already start to act before we actually realize that this is what I'm going to do. They quite, you can find them on internet, these famous studies that done. So because that basically what happens that we have a desire, and then we know that there is a Paramatma that allow us. If we can raise our arm, then Paramatma say, okay, you can raise your arm. If we can't, we're disabled or something, we don't have karma to do it, then we won't be able to do it. And then we have 33,000 of demigods who making things happen. You know, we have the life air, they regulate things, and then here I am waving my hands around and talking. You know, so basically it all comes down to our desire. And we know that desire is different to needs. Every one of us have needs. We need to sleep, we need to eat, we need to mate, we need to defend. How we're going to do it differs for everyone. If I'm thirsty, someone will go and drink water, someone will have juice, someone likes to drink it from metal cup, others like glass cup, you know. We like so different. We like different music, we like different clothes, we choose different friends, we have different ideas where I want to go for holiday. Why? What dictates what we choose? The modes of material nature do. Once we come into contact with them, there is a different combinations of them. And the modes, they present themselves as qualities. Everything we see around, always in 3 modes of material nature. The music, the food, you know, clothes, weather, anything you take has different gradations. You know, it's from 3 modes of material nature. We come in contact and then we get affected by it. So that's why there is so much variety in this world, because we have different desires. You know, someone wants to, you know, someone has desires in such a way that they become a tiger, you know, or a bird, or, you know, Asian woman, or, I don't know, Chinese man, or depending. And so this is how the circle of samsara works. We have a desire. For example, if I want to become an influencer, Instagram influencer, or a musician, whoever you want to choose, you know, any sort of desire leads to certain actions. So at first, the desires we have are dictated by the modes of material nature. Depending on which modes we are in, that will dictate the desires we're going to have. And then to reach those desires, we got to engage in activity. If I want to be influencer, what do? Okay, I got to open Instagram account. I'm going to, you know, be interesting. I got to find something that is different from other people. I'm going to look happy. I got to look successful. I got to post my videos. You know, so there is certain activities that start happening, and activities lead to certain lifestyle. I have a lifestyle of influencer or a lifestyle of musician. If I want to be musician, then okay, I have to jam in the evening, go to clubs. I have to associate with certain people. That's a certain lifestyle. The lifestyle leads to habits. You know, when we do certain things perpetually, if we got used to jamming in the evening in club, then I can't wake up early. My habit is waking up around 11 maybe, you know, and then slowly starting my day, maybe with coffee and whatever you have it, you know, the habit of influencer. You can't eat until you take photo of it. That's the most classic one. You know, so you constantly have to be switched on, you know. So the habits, they always say the habits gives you certain characters, your second character. And then from all this, you get a quality of life, a certain quality of life. From certain quality of life, you get new desires. There is your circle complete. New desires lead you to new actions, and etc. And it goes like that. And the interesting thing about it, that it either goes higher, and your quality of life gets higher, and you progress, you become more happy, more in harmony, or whatever, or you go down, eventually to the animal forms of lives. And we often hear that slogan from Nike, you know, just do it. You know, it seems so nice. You just do it, you just be. But the way the material nature is programmed is that if you don't go against the current, then you go down, you start to degrade. We know from our life, from our experience, if you want to progress, if you want to achieve or become better at something, you gotta work on it. You gotta put some resistance. You're gonna go against the current. Yeah, it doesn't come easy. So in this way, we go up and down all the time, you know. And I'm sure if you look back at your life, you could notice that where you started and where you're at. And sometimes it's, you know, we start to get new dreams, something we couldn't dream before. Well, now we can, you know, or opposite. So in this way, we build our own prison. We go inside it, we lock ourselves in there, and then we complain there is no freedom. So Krishna had to create this world to facilitate our free will, to facilitate our desire to be independent. And that desire to dominate is present in all conditioned souls. Doesn't matter if it's human or animal or is a tree. And that material energy is so powerful that the pig actually thinks that the shit it eats is yummy. It's actually enjoying it. So this is how powerful the energy is. There is a story of Lord Indra that got cursed, and then he ended up being a pig. And then Lord Brahma came because he's like, we really need you back there at the heavenly planets. You have to come. And he goes, well, I don't want to come. I'm happy here. I have my she-pig and my baby piglets. And he's like, why do I want to go anywhere? Lord Brahma was really trying hard. Like, we really need you. You need to come back. And he didn't want to. And that's Lord Indra. He wasn't coming back to Australia. He was talking about heavenly planets. So, and this is when we come to this point that God is great, because even though Krishna creates this energy, it doesn't actually influence him. He's not under control of that. And we often say that there is lots of laws of material nature, but you can't really call them laws because they're more like arrangement. Because for Krishna, it's really easy just to neglect the karma and wipe it out, just to lift the influence of three modes of material nature, because he is the controller, he is the master. And so this is where we come to this point that how do we get out of it? This is why it says here that we have to discuss it over and over again, these topics, because the first step to our freedom is to understand just to accept the authorities of Vedas. When we understand that it's not like I can just do whatever I want and whatever, there is no. We start to understand now there is certain laws. There is someone there who is above me. It's not just do it, And this is the first step. And then we have to discuss these topics. We have to associate with devotees. Because it's not the actual activity that binds us is here, is the attachment to that activity, attachment to this enjoying mentality. And so the good example about this, about the discussion. First, I probably wanted to say what discussion is. Discussion is actually talking about topic with someone. You share ideas, opinions, question, and explanation back and forth. The discussion usually includes reasons, examples, pros and cons, different viewpoints, clarification, and the goal would be to learn, to understand better, to clarify. So this is what Srila Prabhupada encourages us to do. To get out of influence of three modes of nature, we have to have this discussion. And discussion also implies certain relationship you have. You don't just do it with anyone. And good example, which is close to me, is like if you learn psychology, you study the thing, you learn what trauma is, you learn what perception is, you learn how you get conditioned. Okay, I'm finishing. And then, to really start to understand how it works, you go to a psychologist and you start noticing, how is it affecting me? And you start noticing, okay, wait, this behavior that I'm exhibiting is not real. This is my trauma response. I see certain things in a certain way because I've been traumatized. This is not real. So this is the first step you do once you start to understand what's happening and how it works and how your psyche reacts. This is first step of being free from it. Then next time you get in this situation, you go, oh, wait, my reaction coming, this is not real. This is just me reacting on trauma. So this is just one of those examples. So to be able to transcend this, we need to talk. We need to associate with devotees. And Krishna is able, when he gets pleased with us, to leave those modes of material nature. So that's why those topics are really important. And Srila Prabhupada says that the process of yoga requires of us realizing that we're not enjoyers. And the process of devotional service is perfect for that, because we start discussing this, and at the same time we serve to Krishna, and we, learning how to trust that Krishna is in control. I should let go. And the more we do that, the more attachment grows there. And he says that the first sign that we've been controlled is that we're constantly getting punished. In material nature, constantly punishing us is kicking us once, again and again. And he would say that people are so dull that they don't think, why am I constantly getting punished? They just keep trying to knock on this door, which is closed. But once we actually start to realize and ask why, this is when the human life starts there. So I think I'm out of my time. So thank you so much for your attention. I don't know if there is any questions. Sure. It's a very good question, because it is, but at the same time, you see, once you decided that you don't want to be with Krishna, your initial desire that I want to be independent leads you to the fact that you end up in material world, yeah? And once you're here, you get in contact with 3 modes of material nature. It's inevitable. So the 3 modes of material nature would influence what you desire. But the original desire comes, the first desire comes that I want to be independent from Krishna. So that's why it is your desire. And once we get in touch with modes of material nature, and when we become devotees, then our desires start to change. This is the whole process of Krishna consciousness, to change that desire, that I want to be with Krishna. And every day we make that choice. Every time, this is why it's so difficult. They often say that every day of life in Krishna consciousness is a fight with Maya, because we have choices. What do I do? Do I go and chant my rounds nicely, or do I watch my movie, for example? So, yeah.
Thank you. So desire doesn't belong to the spiritual world. It's not material energy in some way.
Sorry, could you say?
So desire is not material energy in some way. It's
Yes. We can't not desire. We can't not to act. It is always there, but what we're acting, what we're desiring is the main question.
Thank you for the class. Okay, so how do you discern what Krishna wants for you and what you desire?
That's a great question. So this is why we have spiritual master. So because otherwise, most of our time we acting under our mind. Our mind tells us, because that's all mind does. It just says, I want this, I don't want that. It knows what is good, what is not good, what feels good, what doesn't feel good. So this is why we have a disciplic succession, we have spiritual master. And in ideal situation, you should be able to have some senior devotee who knows your situation, and they can give you, that's what it's called sadhana. Sadhana is certain practice, and it usually meant to be tuned to a specific person, knowing your circumstances, because we're also different, and what is good for one is not always good for another person. So when you want to become devotional, and that's what it says in Nectar of Devotion, that when Krishna knows that the soul wants to go back to him, he sends him a spiritual master, because it is impossible otherwise, just because what you're saying, how would you know if it's your desire or if it's Krishna's desire? There are other few things, like you could see that sometimes devotees want you to do something, like sometimes we want to sing, lead kirtan, but my Guru Maharaj would tell me, just wait, you see if devotees want you to do it. If devotees will ask you, that is a good sign that Krishna wants you to sing. So we got to be careful. Yeah. Yeah, that's a beautiful reflection, because at the end of the day we can't ask every single day our spiritual master, what is it I should do? So we do have to use our intelligence. That's what Prabhupada would say, just what we're describing. Use our intelligence and try to figure out, what do I think, Krishna would like in this situation, my spiritual master would like. We can take advice, and sometimes we're going to make mistakes because it's inevitable, because we're conditioned. But the main thing is just we try our best. We try our best and we offer it to Krishna. And Krishna knows, just like we were talking about these silly drawings that our children do. They do attempt. So Krishna see that you're sincerely trying. You're not just acting whimsically, but you're trying. You put effort. And he, he's merciful. That's what we rely upon. And even with your spiritual master, if you please your spiritual master, this is the shortest way of getting Krishna's mercy. Because they're very kind, they have very soft heart. Sometimes you do something little for them, and they can easily be pleased. And if they're pleased, then Krishna gives you anything for their devotees. Thank you. Anyone else? Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.